So good evening from not so sunny Scotland. It was windy a few days ago. I'm delighted to host Dr. Elisabeth Philipps, who's actually about as far away from civilization as you can get right now in Scotland. She's in the Outer Hebrides, and you experienced 100-mile-per-hour winds the other day, didn't you?
We did, yes. Quite extreme.
That's quite impressive.
Yeah.
So Elisabeth has very much dedicated a big chunk of her academic inquiry over the last few years into the, I always struggle with this word, endocannabinoid system. You'll say it better.
Tomato, that's fine.
And it's a fascinating, I mean, I feel like I know quite a lot about the physiological systems, but I don't know much about this at all. And I've heard Elisabeth speak once before, and I know she has a lot to share with you on this subject. And of course, related to that is CBD and CBD oils and products. So I know she will go into that tonight as well. We'll keep the normal structure of our webinars. We'll let Elisabeth talk for 40, 45 minutes, and then we'll open for questions. So we've got the chat box. Anytime you get a question, just plonk it in there. I will then ask the questions to Elisabeth at the end. And as Elisabeth gets going, I'll ask you just to get used to the chat box. Tell us where you're from, what you do, and what you'd like to learn tonight. Okay, with that, over to you, Elisabeth.
Lovely. Well, thank you ever so much, Ian, firstly, for inviting me on to this fantastic monthly webinar series to talk about the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS. And thank you, of course, to CISN as well. As Ian said, I've done a little bit of work before with you all. And so I'm really delighted to be back from the edge of the world. As Ian said, I'm currently traveling in the Outer Hebrides. And yes, just glad that the storms have calmed down so that you can hear me and see me today with our internet. So as Ian said, I've got quite a bit of knowledge and clinical experience in this endocannabinoid system. And I really want to share with you today, a sports-centric view, because there's no doubt there's a lot that we should be considering and a lot that we can do from a functional medicine point of view to be supporting our endocannabinoid system. Certainly there's CBD, but it's not just all about CBD. There's other aspects of our diet and lifestyle as well. So very quickly, I am a functional medicine practitioner as well as a clinical neuroscientist. So I specialize in CBD and the endocannabinoid system, but also in the areas of traumatic brain injuries, so especially around contact sport. So I do a lot of work in the professional rugby stage and in other contact sports as well. And, really very proactive in the area of spreading the word of what I call cannabinoid medicine, or CBD, medical cannabis, in supporting various areas. So please feel free to join me on social or to check out my website as well if you want more information into any of these areas that we're going to be sharing tonight. So what I want to take us through before we get to the questions and answer stage is looking at the ECS, I'm going to call it this evening, and really looking at the physical, biochemical and psychological health aspects of this system, because it's a system that is widespread throughout the body. So it's got what I call fingers in lots of pies in areas of our health. But specifically, of course, I want to look at the links between the ECS and sports performance and recovery. There's certainly some evidence that's being gathered now, some clinical data that's really beginning to suggest quite a strong link in supporting this particular system, but always bringing it back. As I say, I'm an integrative medicine or functional medicine practitioner, trained at the Institute of Functional Medicine a number of years ago when I sort of left my medical and my research roles. And so I'm very much into how diet and lifestyle, this is what comes first. Food supplements are very important. They can play a very specific or very supportive role in various programs, including sports programs, but it's all about diet and lifestyle first. So I want to sort of focus on this area as well as discussion around CBD, because I know there's always a lot of questions in this area. So let's set the scene around the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS. And, I think we're all very familiar with the digestive system, the immune system, the respiratory system, the central nervous system. These are all systems that we think about and we consider in an integrative medicine approach. But, my real focus now is to join the ECS, the endocannabinoid system, as part of that network of systems that we're considering, so that we're really considering the body in a very holistic way. So kind of breaking down the endocannabinoid system, it was only really discovered first in the sort of late 80s, 1990s, which for a system that has been within us on an evolutionary scale ever since we were crawling around on the seabed as sea urchins and fish, this really is a very, very new discovery in terms of sort of medicine and in terms of clinical research. But it was the discovery of the CB1 receptor in the late 80s, which sort of kind of began to drive the fact that we have a system that responds to cannabinoids. And cannabinoids are compounds that are either produced within the body, endocannabinoids, endo meaning internal, so we produce our own endocannabinoids, or we're familiar with the cannabinoids that are produced in the hemp plant, like CBD, also called phytocannabinoids. So we'll come on to sort of delineating between those as we move through. But CB1 receptor was first discovered. It's primarily found within the brain, and it's what's called a G protein coupled receptor. We don't need to go into details today around the different types of receptors, but really suffice to say that the CB1 receptor is the most prevalent GPCR, or G protein coupled receptor, in the brain. So if we think about it, we've known about the sort of brain anatomy, brain physiology, a whole stack of that area in the central nervous system for many hundreds of years. But suddenly we're finding a receptor protein that is the most prevalent protein throughout the brain, receptor protein. So again, to my mind, this is really fascinating that we've got this new system, but something that is so prevalent, that is found throughout so many different regions of the brain and the body, that we've really got something we can work with in terms of supporting our health. So the CB1 receptor, as I said, is primarily found sort of in the brain and the central nervous system, but also to a lesser extent within other tissues as well. Hot on its tail came the CB2 receptor, which is more in the periphery. So this is more in our immune system, more in our bones. You can see, as indicated by the purple dots on the little sort of pictogram on the right-hand side of this slide. But also, because there are receptors within the body, that also means that there are activators produced within the body that respond to those receptors. And this is where our endocannabinoids come in. So our endocannabinoids, the two main ones, the first one is anandamide, and this has got a beautiful name. It's actually Sanskrit for the word bliss, or bliss molecule. So it kind of gives you an understanding of what this particular endocannabinoid, this mediator, does. It helps us relax, it makes us feel good. So anandamide is very important. And in fact, actually, when we talk about the runner's high that people experience in training, that sort of blissed out feeling that you get if you're a runner, if you've been doing a particular amount of peak training, quite often that's attributed to adrenaline or noradrenaline, but it's actually our endocannabinoid system. It's actually anandamide that is creating that runner's high feeling. So we're probably already familiar with anandamide within our systems anyway. There's also 2AG. We don't need to go into details of these today, but just to make you familiar with the fact that our body produces endocannabinoids. So already I hope you've got your practitioner's mind in gear and you're thinking, well, okay, if we're producing this, how can we support our body to produce anandamide and 2AG more? And that's what we'll come on to. So we've got cannabinoid receptors, the main ones being CB1 and CB2, but also I just want to point out that other G protein coupled receptors, other ion channels, the 5-HT, some of the 5-HT serotonin receptors, for example, these are all part of our endocannabinoid system as well. So CB1 and CB2 aren't exclusive, the only receptors in our ECS. So we've kind of got this system that's really diffuse throughout the body. And to my mind, that's why the endocannabinoid system, part of the reason why we haven't really known about it for so long, because it's so diffuse. It doesn't look pretty in the imagery stakes. If you think about the cardiovascular system or the lungs, all of these wonderful imagery pictures that you can get, the endocannabinoid system being a set of discrete receptor proteins, set of discrete enzymes throughout different tissues, not physically linked in ways of veins or nerves means that we're not able to sort of visualize the ECS as nicely. And then the third part of our ECS is a set of enzymes, the FAR enzyme being one of them, and that just helps regulate the levels of our body's own natural endocannabinoids. So the reason I'm mentioning this FAR enzyme is that that actually regulates the levels of anandamide within our body, and CBD actually works by blocking the FAR enzyme to then enhance our body's own levels of anandamide. So that's just one of the reasons why I'm mentioning this specific enzyme. But really the take-home message is we've got the endocannabinoid system spread throughout our bodies, nearly all of our different tissues, and it's working via our body's own endocannabinoids acting at a variety of different receptors. So I mentioned that if we're producing our own endocannabinoids, and this gives us a shoe-in really into how we can support the endocannabinoid system. So a slightly busy biochemical picture. I do apologize for this time of the evening. I'm a biochemist by training though as well, so I can't resist a little bit of biochemistry. But really all we need to be focusing on is the fact that we are converting phospholipids, so things like phosphatidylethanolamin or phosphatidylinositol. I hope you're familiar with phospholipids in the fact that our cell membranes are really made up of a large percentage of different phospholipids. And so phospholipids in the cell membranes are converted via a series of enzymatic steps into anandamide and 2-AG, which you'll see in the sort of, the peachy orange color boxes there. And then they're broken down, these endocannabinoids, as I mentioned, by the enzymes within the ECS. So again, we're going to come back to this. If we've got a good quality cell membrane, if we've got healthy cells, then we're going to be able to produce endocannabinoids, and therefore we're going to have a balance and a function, a healthy function of our endocannabinoid system. So we'll come back to this when we're looking at how we can support our endocannabinoids. And then on the right-hand side, this is just a very simplistic image showing that when we're producing endocannabinoids, or indeed if we have phytocannabinoids in our body, such as CBD, then they're either acting within our CNS, mainly via the CB1 receptor, and activating our neurons, our nerves within the spinal column, within our peripheral nervous system, or within our brains, or indeed they're acting at the CB2 receptors and acting, say, within the immune system. So again, this really fantastic system. There's so much more research that's to come for us to fully understand what's happening, but already we've got a good idea of what's happening within the ECS. So we've got this ECS, everyone has one, as I said, right from sea urchins and fish right through the animal kingdom. We have this set of receptors and enzymes and endocannabinoids. So what does it do? Why do we have one? Well, the main reason is that the ECS maintains homeostasis in the body. That's probably the simplest way of putting it. So homeostasis is this state of balance. It's our bodies pulling us into this, or trying to keep us, rather, trying to maintain us in this state of balance. And I always say that our bodies want to be well. They want to be functioning optimally. That's how our body's sort of default setting is. But we do so much, in our lives, maybe through stress, maybe through our diet, maybe even, through, an excessive training program as well, that is kind of pulling our bodies out of balance. So our endocannabinoid system is always trying to pull us back into this state of balance. So what this means is that the endocannabinoid system is absolutely integral to our inflammation or our inflammatory response within the bodies. And I'm sure you're all aware of the role of inflammation and underlying inflammation in the body. I know that it's discussed throughout the CISN and various content, because when we have a state of chronic inflammation, this is just triggering so much, sort of so many issues throughout our bodies, not just from a sort of a pain point of view, but also in areas like neuroinflammation, so inflammation in the brain is said one of my sort of real key areas. So the ECS is very important for maintaining balance. I mean, we never completely get rid of inflammation. We always have a tone, an inflammatory tone, and we need this in order to be able to function, but we don't want it tipping over into sort of a chronic inflammatory state, the higher chronic levels of our pro-inflammatory mediators. So the ECS is all about that balance there. We also have the ECS very much in a pivotal role around sleep and the maintenance of sleep-wake cycles. of stress. We know that the ECS is upregulated and changed in states of chronic stress. So be this from, lifestyle, be this from training regimes, all the different impacts that our body experiences through stress, mood, nervous system activity. Very important, the receptors, the CB1 receptors in particular, in regions of the brain for cognitive processes, including memory and learning, but also bone health. Now, I've not got a chance, or really just timing wise, to go through all of the areas in a little bit more detail, but I would just like to point you to the end of my slides. I've included an appendix so that you will find the relevant research papers there and a little bit of information if you're interested in these areas. But there's a lot of work now looking at the ECS around osteoporosis, bone thinning, and also arthritis, rheumatoid and osteoarthritis as well. We've also got a role of the ECS in gut microbiota and digestive function. I did a whole ICANN 2-hour lecture on this conference last year. So again, not got time to go into this today, but there's a pivotal link of what we sometimes call the cannabidiome with the gut microbiome. So again, this sort of crossover of these two very integral systems. And we've also got a role of the endocannabinoid system in the hormones around appetite and metabolism. So there's so many areas. This isn't the only parts, but I just wanted to sort of pick out what I felt were the kind of some of the key areas that sports practitioners and athletes are interested in. So again, being a neuroscientist, just have to put one image of the brain up at least. And really, this is just showing quite how many areas of the brain, so there we go, the CB1 receptor is found in, right from our cortical regions, the prefrontal cortex, which is so important in that sort of processing, our learning and memory centers, but also very importantly, the levels of CB1 receptor in the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is our emotional center, part of the limbic system. So again, we've got a real role of our endocannabinoid system in our perception, not just in our sort of our moods, our emotions, but things like our perception of pain. So again, when we're thinking of pain, sometimes we might think of the biochemical or the physiological pathways involved, the interleukins, the cytokines, but actually we also have a region in our brains that perceives pain. So pain management in athletes is absolutely critical, certainly in terms of, looking at ways that we can manage and, potentially mitigate against sort of overuse of certain opiates, for example. So again, if we've got a way of modulating pain within the bodies, both from a perception and a biochemical point of view, it's kind of like a real positive double whammy. So I just want to spend a few moments to go through the endocannabinoid system in what I think are some of the interesting areas in terms of a sports-centric viewpoint before we come on into the practical side of how we can modulate the ECS through diet, lifestyle, and looking at CBD. So this is taken from a paper, I was going to say 2 years ago, but now of course we're 4 years ago, aren't we? Time flies, doesn't it? We're in 2022 already. So this is just taken really looking at how endocannabinoids in the body can regulate the immune response, both at the, this should say, adaptive and the immune level. So we can see then, of course, within our immune system, we've got the peripheral system. So this, if we remember, the CB2 receptors tend to be located within the periphery, especially around the immune cells. But we also have a component of our immune system within our central nervous system as well. So again, remember me saying how important endocannabinoids, the endocannabinoid system is around neuroinflammation as well. And so we know from this particular paper, from other studies that are coming out as well, that the endocannabinoids are really, sort of working at bringing the body back into a more sort of steady state of the sort of the tonic inflammation that we need to experience for just healthy function. So it does so in a number of different ways, the CB2 receptor, but also, if you remember me mentioning, there's other receptors as well, the TRPV1, for example, a couple of orphan receptors. So it's not exclusive to cannabinoid receptors. But the overall function of the ECS is to be lowering levels of the pro-inflammatory cytokines and therefore decreasing inflammation. So the endocannabinoid system imbalances, or indeed supporting the system, have far-reaching implications for chronic inflammatory diseases, inflammatory bowel disorders. So I work with a number of athletes, and certainly sort of ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, high inflammatory component, of course, the ECS playing a role in that. Arthritis, either osteo or rheumatoid arthritis, and neuroinflammation as well. So we're talking here, either acute concussions, acute knocks to the head, but more importantly, what I see is the CTE style, where you've got the chronic concussions, the chronic head knocks that are happening time and again in training or in performances. So really, take-home message is the endocannabinoid system plays a number of different roles in reducing inflammation. Of course, pain, as I mentioned, can really be a great hindrance, not only to performance, also in recovery and training as well, very important. So our pain response, starts within the periphery, at the site of injury. We raise a pain response through biochemical changes, maybe pro-inflammatory markers, certain interleukins, certain cytokines that are released at the site of injury. But then those messages travel back up through the spinal column into our brain, into those parts of the brain that I was talking about that perceive pain. So we've got, as I said, the biochemical and our perception of pain as well. So we can already see, or we've already shown, that the endocannabinoid system can be modulated, balances to reduce the biochemical response in pain. But as I mentioned, if we're also adapting at the CB1 receptor level within the amygdala, within the limbic system of the brain, we're altering our perception and our perceptive response to pain as well. Also anandamide, so that one of the endocannabinoids, as we said, is a direct TRPV1, the vanilloid receptor, which is particularly found within the spinal column, spinal cord, and this is associated in pain pathways as well. We've got the CB2 receptors, these mediate the inflammatory pain that we've just been talking about, suppressing the local secretion of pro-inflammatory factors. So again, the take-home message is the endocannabinoid system is working both peripherally and also centrally in order to manage and modulate our response to pain as well. We have the endocannabinoid system in stress. So again, stressful situations, everything from just daily living, or of course, stress responses that are experienced through training, through performance as well, through matches or sort of sporting activities. And there's a very good paper, again, a number of years old now, 5-6 years old, but looking at how stress can actually upregulate things like the FAR enzyme, so the enzyme that increases the breakdown of anandamide, one of our endocannabinoids, and therefore we see a decrease in the levels of anandamide. So stress is directly impacting the tone, the tonic, the phasic tone of our endocannabinoid system. So again, chronic stress is associated with things like heightened pain sensitivity, for example, increased inflammation in chronic stress, poor sleep, high anxiety, appetite dysregulation, nausea. So, a lot of areas that are being impacted. So, stress is obviously, sort of impacting throughout the body, throughout many different systems. It impacts our gut microbiota, for example, can impact levels of different neurotransmitters in the brain, but also we've got this endocannabinoid system that is maintaining the balance within all those systems that is also being impacted as well. So a healthy endocannabinoid system maintains an inflammatory homeostasis, the balance, and therefore the resulting pain response throughout the body. So again, already thinking, how can we help ourselves? How can we help support our endocannabinoid system? Will it make a difference as well? So what's our summary here then? The ECS is widely distributed transmitter system. So again, receptors, endocannabinoids that controls peripheral and centrally mediated homeostasis. The endocannabinoid system is biochemically linked to inflammatory processes, the hypothalamic pituitary axis, the HPA, and vagal tone, and is disrupted through stress, whatever those stressors, whatever those inputs are that are coming in. This then impacts inflammation, pain response, sleep, mood, as well as many other areas of health as well. So we've kind of got this system that we don't really talk about, that we don't really consider as practitioners, or maybe many practitioners don't up until now, as to how we can go about supporting it. So I've put this title as the ECS impact in sport, but actually, of course, this is goes across the board. But really what we're saying here is that there can be a dysfunction in the endocannabinoid system. Now, how this dysfunction arises, it could be external, environmental inputs that we've been talking about, things like stress. But also we can have epigenetic changes as well. So epigenetic changes means, epigenetic changes such as stress, but we might also have genetic changes as well. So certain SNPs, there are certain sequences that are affected that then affect the activity of the FAR enzyme, for example, or affect the activity of the cannabinoid receptors. So again, I'm not going to go into this today. It's something that I do, sort of talk about through social and through various other channels as well, but it can be quite important at times, to sort of consider, how we can go about supporting, because for some people, it might be that they're just not producing enough anandamide. And there's a couple of quite good studies looking at people who experience greater heightened levels of anxiety through to generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD, actually have genetically lower levels of anandamide compared to people that don't experience general anxiety disorder. So again, there's can be impact. It might be for some people, we need to be supporting with either greater levels of CBD or phytocannabinoids or dietary support than others require as well. So in terms of direct measurements, obviously that's not applicable, and I don't say for one moment that everybody needs to go out and get tested for SNPs in these particular areas, but at the same time, just to point out that there can be imbalances within our system at the genetic level as well. So whatever dysfunction, imbalances may be occurring in the endocannabinoid system, this impacts its tonic and phasic homeostatic function, so that the general tone throughout the ECS, but also our circadian rhythms. We have these sort of 24-hour cycles within our bodies. Our endocannabinoid system also has a sort of a phasic quality to its sort of how it provides balance within the body as well. So, we can also then therefore think, other imbalances that are happening might be arising from things like, lack of phospholipids, essential fatty acids, the quality of our cell membranes, how our endocannabinoids are synthesized in the first place. So really all of these factors have the potential to impact in the areas of metabolic disease, pain, inflammatory disease, the pathophysiology of stress, all of these that are impacting sports performance, but also training and recovery as well. So we've got a number of different entry points, if you like, as to how we can go in and start supporting our endocannabinoid system. So let's move on into the practical side then, a little bit of a whistle-stop tour through some aspects of the endocannabinoid system, but references are listed at the end of these slides. And as I said, there's an appendix with a little bit more detail in certain areas as well. So back to our biochemical image here, little diagram, but again, just reminding us that phospholipids are the building blocks of our endocannabinoids. Our cannabinoids require fats, the right types of fats in our diet. So if we have healthy cell membranes, we are going to obviously have healthy cell function, but in turn, we're going to be able to be producing endocannabinoids. So I have a biological maxim, which I like to state at times like this, which is structure subserves function. So again, if we can think about the structure of our cell membranes through how we're providing quality fats in particular, and our brains, the cell membranes in our brains are made up of 60% fat. So we need to be thinking of good quality fats in the diet. And then this is going to be, as I say, sort of providing the structure as well as the function of our cells. So again, this is a slightly busy diagram, but this is showing us really that the cell membranes, so the little sort of yellow lines that you can see, the little sort of circles and lines there, those are the lipid bilayer. And within our lipid bilayer, we have also EPA and DHA from essential fatty acids, so the omega-3 essential fatty acids that we find in the diet, as well as arachidonic acid, which is an omega-6 essential fatty acid. So both of these are very important structural structural and functional fats that are found in cell membranes. And we can see just from this paper here, released in 2017, that actually we get, sort of a variety of sort of subtypes of endocannabinoids that are released via enzymatic conversion of EPA and DHA, as well as arachidonic acid, that can support our endocannabinoid system. So not only are we looking at phospholipids, which are very important, and we can extract these, we can get these through the diet, but also we need to be looking at our essential fatty acids as well. So our omega-3, which is the EPA and DHA on the right-hand side of this image, as well as our arachidonic acid, which is the omega-6 essential fatty acid. So again, we need to be thinking about the structure of the cell membranes and the quality of fats that we are recommending or consuming in our diets. But it's all about the balance. I think, again, there was a message a number of years ago, that it was all about the omega-3s, almost at the expense of omega-6. Now, there's no doubt that omega-6 fatty acids are far more prevalent in our diets, and that there is, when an imbalance, a potential to initiate a cascade of pro-inflammation through the omega-6 pathways. Arachidonic acid is a very important structural fat within our cell membranes. It's very important for endocannabinoid system, as well as other signaling, but also too much of omega-6s in the diet has the potential to promote inflammatory cytokines and interleukin production as well. So what we're looking for is a balance. And again, this is a whole nother webinar just specifically on the omega-3 and the omega-6 balance within the diet. But really, what this particular area, when we are focusing within the endocannabinoid system within this discussion, is that if we are, sort of creating, sort of an imbalance, then actually we're going to be affecting the balance and the response, the function of the endocannabinoid system. So, really, what we're looking at, as I say, is to be providing, enough of the omega-3 sources, the oily fish, for example. We'll come on to this. I've got a slide to look through diet, but at the same time as well, ensuring that, we're getting, some good quality omega-6 fatty acids as well. Now, the problem with omega-6 fatty acids is they're quite often found in vegetable oils, for example, and these are very, can be very harmful. They've been processed. There might be, issues around things like the vegetable oils converted into margarines, the vegetarian blocks, the vegan blocks that you see, and there's the potential for damaging of these oils. So that's the issue around omega-6 is more in the diet, is not the omega-6 that's found within food. Arachidonic acid is found, sort of quite high levels within meat, especially red meats, for example, but it's whether these fats have been damaged in food processing. So again, we're coming back to the sort of the quality of the food and the quality of the fats, not just the types of fats as well. So the take-home message here, and we'll come on to looking at this practically now, is that we want a balance between our sort of omega essential fatty acids, but also ensuring that we're getting good quality fats within the diet as well. So let's have a think then. As I said, we're looking for omega-3 and omega-6 essential fatty acids. The EPA and DHA are the omega-3s, arachidonic acid is the omega-6. And we can also get phospholipids from products such as lecithin, for example. So there are a number of different soy lecithin, but I tend to recommend a sunflower lecithin. So we're avoiding, sort of soy-based products for, a number of different environmental and potential health reasons there. So we're looking then for the omega-3, omega-6, foods, whole foods that are balanced, that contain a balance of these essential fatty acids. Walnuts, have a higher omega-6 level compared to omega-3. There is omega-3 in there though, but we're looking at the whole foods. Sardines and anchovies, particularly high in the omega-3s, eggs as well. Flax seeds, I always recommend using ground flax seeds because flax seeds are just too tiny for us to chew and to digest. If we think about it, seeds are designed to be picked up by birds, flown away, pooped out, and new plants to grow. So our bodies aren't designed in many ways to break down whole seeds, whole nuts. So if we're grinding flax seeds, we're able to access the fats, the nutrients, lots of great vitamins and minerals and other nutrients, phytonutrients found within flax seeds. Ideally freshly ground flax seeds, or keep your ground flaxseed in the fridge because that prevents the degradation of oils, the delicate oils that are in them. You get flax oil as well, use it cold pressed, use it as a salad dressing, for example, don't cook with it. But again, think about the whole foods, think about the whole good quality fats rather than relying on the processed sides and the oils, the vegetable oils and areas that we get, which have the potential for damaged fats. But there's also other compounds in other parts of our diet that support the endocannabinoid system specifically as well. Camellia sinensis, the tea plant, for example, and herbs that contain terpenes. All of these can enhance the endocannabinoid system tone. So various phytonutrients that can really support there. Certain phytonutrients found in black pepper, for example, lemon balm, a particular herb, hops, cloves, oregano, cinnamon, curcumin. We're talking diet diversity here. This is another key area. I know that Ian is very keen on this. It's something that I'm very keen on as well, is that, the more variety that we can get in our diet, the number of people, the number of patients, clients that I see that are, stick to the same breakfast, the same lunch, and might mix it up a little bit for an evening meal. We need to be thinking diversity. And, if we can use more herbs and spices to add flavor to, to add texture even, but flavor to our food, we're then getting a whole range of different phytonutrients that are going to be supporting our health in a number of different ways, but certainly supporting our endocannabinoid system as well. So, think, outside of the box, other nutrients that are supporting this area. As I said, didn't really have time to even mention going into the gut microbiome and support of the endocannabinoid system, but this was taken from another presentation. But suffice to say that polyphenols within the diet, so polyphenol-rich fruits, for example, support a certain type of gut bacteria, the Akkermansia gut bacteria, which in turn has been shown to directly interact with the endocannabinoid system within the gut. So again, it's diet diversity. Echinacea directly supports the endocannabinoid system as well as the immune system. And then my absolute favorite, of course, is raw cacao powder. Now, I couldn't get by without having some dark chocolate every day. I tried giving up dark chocolate for 4 days last year, and it just didn't feel like it was worth it. So yes, but we're talking good quality again. We're talking dark chocolate, ideally raw cacao powder, because this is what's containing the minerals, the nutrients, but also raw cacao powder contains anandamide-like compound. So if you think, I think about when I eat dark chocolate, I instantly feel happy, but that is partly this whole sort of supporting of the endocannabinoid system as well, this bliss molecule. So a little bit of dark chocolate, obviously low sugar content, the higher the cacao content, the better. This is also supporting our endocannabinoid system. We also need to think of the endocannabinoid system and lifestyle as well. I mentioned the impact of stress on the ECS. The ECS is intimately linked with vagal tone. Now, the vagus nerve runs from our gut up to our brainstem and is the main part of our parasympathetic nervous system. So we have kind of very layman's terms, but two parts to our nervous system: the sympathetic, which is the fight and flight, the get up and go, the rah part of our nervous system. And we have the parasympathetic, or the rest and digest part of the nervous system, which is what the vagus nerve is all about. That helps calm us down, helps us feel relaxed. So the ECS is really important, having a good balance within the ECS to support parasympathetic, or the rest and digest part of our nervous system. So it can be easier said than done. I know I work with professional athletes, telling them to manage their stress, but really, rest is absolutely key. Working with international athletes, they get to the top of their game, not just by going all out in the gym and going all out on the rugby pitch, or out on their chosen sports, but actually the rest is a major part, and getting good quality sleep and good quality rest in order to support all areas of their body and their functions. But we know about the support of the endocannabinoid system as well. So in the final part, we're going to come on and look at quality of sleep as well. But, just things like 15 minutes of quiet time a day, no tech input, away from people, away from conversations, sitting out in nature when you can, all of those aspects of being able to calm our nervous systems down, just as I say, 5 to 15 minutes a day really does make a massive difference. We have box breathing, so breathing techniques, the same length of inhale as exhale, just to really engage the vagus nerve, and relaxation apps. Again, I say I work with a lot of the rugby players that use things like Calm app or Headspace in order to, really just help calm the nervous system down. So just for the final part, the last few minutes before I'm going to take questions, I just want to move on to the phytocannabinoids, the cannabinoids that are found in the hemp plant, and how this relates into sport, and whether we can be considering CBD within a sport setting to support the endocannabinoid system. So we have the endocannabinoids, anandamide, 2-AG that I've already talked about, and then the two main cannabinoids that we tend to talk about in general conversation are CBD or cannabidiol and THC or tetrahydrocannabidol. But there are over 85 different phytocannabinoids. I'm not going to go into them all today, but there are certainly plenty of different cannabinoids that are all working and function that are found within the cannabis plant. Now, THC is probably the most well-known one for the sort of psychoactive or the psychotropic component of marijuana. Basically, that's the phytocannabinoid that, if taken in high enough amounts, engages you into the cannabis high, the marijuana high that people are familiar, that have heard about. But cannabidiol, or CBD, is a non-euphoric cannabinoid. Okay, so one of the main questions I get asked is, does CBD oil as a food supplement get you high? No, it doesn't, because it doesn't contain any meaningful amounts of THC, and CBD is a non-euphoric cannabinoid. Okay, so CBD acts in a very different way to THC within the endocannabinoid system. As I said, CBD actually raises the body's natural levels of anandamide, but it doesn't cause any of those psychoactive or psycho-euphoric issues that are found. Now, I don't want to demonize THC here. When THC is combined in the right ratios in medical cannabis, for example, it provides some very great support. There's research coming in around neuroinflammation and support in head injuries, especially this is being pioneered within the US at the moment. Medical cannabis is very important for other illnesses such as cancer pain, such as epilepsies, but it's just THC, is not found in food supplements because it needs to have a license, a Schedule II license, for it to be produced medicinally. So today we're just focusing in on CBD, which is legally found within food supplements. Okay, so the current guidelines are food supplements are legal to sell, recommend, stock and use in the UK if they're derived from this particular strain of cannabis and if they contain less than 0.2% of THC. Okay, so that's the way food supplements are produced and the way CBD is present in food supplements in the UK. But I want to say, from a sports point of view, CBD is the only phytocannabinoid that is accepted on the World Anti-Doping Authority list, banned substance list, so the WADA banned substance list. THC, any other phytocannabinoid, CBD, CBG, CBDA, all of those are still on the WADA banned substance list. So this has real implications if you're a tested athlete. Okay, so we'll come on and think about how we can look at this area in different ways. So is it a risky business? Can you take CBD as an athlete? Well, anybody, whether you're an athlete or not, should be asking what's in your product. And it's exactly the same. What's in your product? Any food supplement you're taking, it's like what's in the food that you're eating. You should know the ingredients, you should know what's in there. So always know what's in the CBD product that you're taking. Reputable company, super important. One that's able to provide you with third-party analysis, one that's able to provide you with the certificate of analysis of the product so that you can see that it's just CBD that's in there. Maybe you can get something called a broad spectrum or full spectrum product. So that's going to contain other phytocannabinoids. So maybe CBG, CBD, but it won't contain any THC or less than 0.2% THC rather, as long as it's legally complying within the UK standards. So of course, it's understanding if you're taking a broad spectrum or a full spectrum CBD product that might contain other cannabinoids other than CBD, the CBG, for example, CBD, and that might then impact if you're a tested professional athlete. So if you're a tested athlete, you want to be taking a CBD isolate. Okay, so that's where the CBD has been extracted, and then it is placed into an oil, which is then able to be used, through a mouth spray or a skin rub, for example. So CBD isolate products will only contain CBD, no other phytocannabinoids that are in there. So understand the difference between the products are really important. So that's CBD isolate versus a broad spectrum or a full spectrum product. Now, there is some science coming through. I am the first to admit that CBD clinical studies are still lacking. We're still playing catch up. This is a very new system. CBD has exploded in terms of a food supplement market. So we're still playing catch up in the research world. But there is some science coming through, smaller scale clinical studies, certainly for delayed onset muscle soreness or DOMS. There's some fairly good evidence for using CBD. I mean, after all, an inflammatory pain response. Neuroprotection, I mentioned as well, so reduction of inflammation within the brain. There's a certain amount of science, clinical science coming through there. Analgesic, pain reduction. I've worked with professional athletes, in particular professional rugby players, who have reduced or even stopped taking their opiate medication because they have been taking CBD alongside, working within the diet and a good recovery program as well. So there's certain aspects that might be useful here. We've also got sports performance anxiety. Now, actually, in terms of reducing anxiety, CBD is a really pretty big one, helping you feel calm, helping you feel relaxed. So this has got some relatively good evidence, sort of more evidence in this particular area. Protection against gastrointestinal inflammation. So I mentioned irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disorders, but IBS as well, really prevalent throughout training athletic population. Traumatic injuries as well. Sleep, we still need to get the clinical data. I mean, certainly there's, a couple of really good studies that have come in looking at sleep, looking at anxiety. But in terms of some larger scale studies, we need to get a little bit more data, though I have a lot of anecdotal evidence from patients that show that CBD has really helped them feel calm and has helped them got a better quality sleep and generally feel more rested as well. So just to point you towards this particular paper, this is the best paper out at the moment, which is looking at CBD across all the different areas of sports performance. We do need more clinical evidence, but that is coming through. And certainly, there's a real sort of suggestion that CBD may be of use in certain areas. I would also point you towards Professor Graham Close's work as well. He does a lot of work at Liverpool John Moores University around CBD. He's doing various studies as well. But he is the first to say, as well as I am, really, if you're a tested athlete, then, you need to be very, very careful in taking CBD products because of the potential of contamination. So, that's a real sort of red flag in that area if you are tested on the athletic side. So just to wrap up then, so I can see we're just coming up now into the question side. So it's just to remind us that really the CBD isolate products are the products to look for, so that we're just getting the CBD on board, looking for the third party and testing can be a really good one as well, something like the BSCG certification to prove that there are no other banned substances or other cannabinoids in the products. Always start low and go slow with CBD oil. So I recommend the sprays for under the tongue or the drops. Sublingual absorption is best. So you're building up, you're not whacking the endocannabinoid system with high levels of CBD. You're building up across the course of a week or so. Splitting the doses as well between morning and evening, very important as well if you're looking at pain or mood, but you can just use CBD in the evening to support sleep if you want to try it in this area. CBD isn't a sedative, so it's supporting your body's own sleep cycles. So you can use CBD during the day and not get tired, but you can use it in the evening to support your own sleep cycles as well. Of course, there are various topical CBD rubs and balms. The current guidelines are no more than 70 milligrams of CBD daily, so do check out what you're taking. I don't have time to go through the safety, but suffice to say that there is an excellent safety profile of CBD. There are also a number of medications that have been authorised by the MHRA and NICE that are prescribed on the NHS, including Epidiolex, which is a CBD oil for childhood epilepsies. So, the NHS wouldn't be prescribing medication that hadn't undergone rigorous testing. So CBD does have a very good safety profile to be able to use. And then just to finish, if you're interested in various products, then I do recommend the 4-5 range. You can get 15% off the entire range, all of their CBD products, as well as their nutritional supplement products with the code 4515. This is run by, co-founded by George Cruz and Dom Day, professional rugby players. So they know what they're talking about, and they only produce products that are CBD isolate. So we know that they don't contain any other phytocannabinoids that have potential for issues further down the line. So if you're interested, as they do, check them out, and you're welcome to use that code anytime. It's a code that can be used at all times. So a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, as always, with the endocannabinoid system. I just really hope that that's pointed out some more areas that you can be supporting clients, through a program, sort of really considering the endocannabinoid system as part of the systems, rather than just focusing on digestive tract or immune system, for example. It's all about lifestyle and diet first and foremost, but CBD can certainly play a pivotal role. I've seen, as I say, firsthand through my clinic in a sports program. And if you're interested in more information, then please feel free to check out my website and social side as well. So I'd like to just say thank you very much for listening. And Ian, I know that I'm sure we've got some questions coming through. So
Thanks, Elizabeth. You could probably unshare now.
Certainly.
So thanks for that. I really enjoyed your very balanced perspective, because you brought in a lot of dietary and lifestyle aspects, because a lot of people go straight to the supplements. I guess in all realms, we need to tier that pyramid, don't we?
Yes.
Just before we go into questions, I've got one announcement that I'd like to quickly make. I'm looking for somebody who would like to write for the FSN magazine. I would need the article by the end of next week. We've had a sort of last minute change. And it can be pretty much on anything, but with some ingredient focus to it. So either send me an email, it's ian@intsportsnutrition.com, or pop me a message in the chat box. Okay, so on to questions. We've got one from Scott. He said, is there an accepted chronological age when you would expect the ECS to have reached maturity, and is there a gender difference in chronological age? So an interesting question.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually. I mean, certainly there are gender differences within the ECS in terms of the ECS is very important in a steroid hormone balance. So we know that the endocannabinoid system, can do with particular support in conditions, such as dysmenorrhea or painful periods, and certainly around sort of postpartum pain as well. So there's a number of different gender differences that can arise. In terms of chronological age, I mean, as I mentioned, the ECS is supported through things like CBD and medical cannabis in childhood epilepsies. This is one of the first areas that these medications came through for. So there's certainly an aspect of the endocannabinoid system that can require supporting through childhood, through adolescence. But in terms of sort of maturity of the endocannabinoid system at a certain age, I'm not aware of any studies that have kind of pinpointed that particular area. So I would say gender differences, yes, in terms of what the ECS is involved in, but it can require support. Well, it requires support throughout life, throughout all different ages, but certainly there are known imbalances that can come in right from childhood, right through to further down the line. But I think, what's interesting to me as a neuroscientist is with all my research and clinical work into the sort of neuroinflammation area, we're seeing dementias, we're seeing Alzheimer's disease, away from TBIs and CTEs in sport, we're seeing, these particular brain conditions come through a lot earlier. Now there's a lot playing, within the background that's contributing to Alzheimer's disease or certain dementias, for example, and high sugar diets, quite often called type 3 diabetes. But I would also say that, the endocannabinoid system is being is part of the whole systems that are being impacted by poor lifestyles, by greater levels of stress, by poor diet. So we're seeing a greater impact on its function, in earlier ages coming through.
Okay, the next one we've got, can competitive athletes use the Sativex sublingual spray that's effective for mitigating pain and spasm in MS and helpful in epilepsy and other neurological disorders?
Of course. So Sativex or Tivex is actually a THC CBD mix. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So no for tested athletes. As I said, the only cannabinoid, and it's WADA release their banned substance list every year. So it's just been released for this year. And CBD is still the only cannabinoid that is on that list. So THC and any other cannabinoids, CBG, CBN, CBD, those are all still on the banned list. So Sativex, as I say, is a THC CBD 1-to-1 mix. Very effective in, as you say, multiple sclerosis, pain, spasms, but would not be accepted in tested athletes. If you're not tested, then if you can get it on prescription, because that's a whole another issue that I'm involved in around medicinal cannabis, but that would be something that you could take if you could get it on prescription. But to be honest, currently GPs don't tend to give out Sativex for sort of general pain. It's kind of under nice clinical guidelines for multiple sclerosis.
Okay, the next one from Jenna. You've already answered this, but it might be worth reiterating. What's your opinion on omega-3 supplementation with regard to ECS? So do you want to just reiterate the balance?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Ian said, I'm all about the diet. We need to be looking at the diet and how we can be supporting the omega balances and getting omega-3s in through the diet. That said, certainly in, a lot of diets, it's difficult to get, sort of higher levels, so ratios, everything from 20-to-1 to 4-to-1, ratios of omega-3s to omega-6s. But I would call for a good quality omega-3 supplement in, sort of high training athletes, with consistent programs in terms of, mitigating against inflammation, supporting pain, supporting brain health as well. So again, looking for a good quality omega-3 food supplement certainly can be something that's added into a program if we feel the diet is lacking. So again, 4-5, for example, have a decent omega-3 product, which is tested, Informed Sport tested as well, all of their range. So we know that that's free from banned substances as well. So.
Simone asks, would you recommend CBD during pregnancy and for nursing mothers?
Very good question. There is currently not enough evidence or data around this. So the current guidelines say don't take CBD whilst pregnant or nursing. So those are the current guidelines that we need to share.
Okay, Paul said, would you test the function of the ECS and omega-3 and 6 levels before supplementation?
Yeah, yes. Okay, so this all goes back to testing, doesn't it? And like I was saying, it's important to sort of understand potentially, what's going on within the system. But I'm very much somebody who, looks at the diet first of all, kind of looks at the whole person rather than narrowing right down straight away to testing omega essential fatty acids and testing the endocannabinoid system. So I would recommend taking the ECS, taking the omegas as a whole, and looking at the person's diet, looking at what symptoms, what they're struggling with, what they need change with, before going straight in and doing any specific testing. I tend to save testing for a bit further down the line if we get intractable sort of issues that aren't resolving through various other dietary and lifestyle means. So by all means incorporate that, but it's not something that needs to be addressed straight away necessarily.
Yeah, and obviously have good communication with your client. How do you feel based on,
Absolutely.
adding in that fish oil or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, I mean, I always say we're detectives, as integrative medicine practitioners. And, really, we need to be, thinking, I know I talk a lot about the endocannabinoid system, but we're thinking, across all systems. But, really some of the most important questions are, how do you feel? I say, yeah, how do you feel when you wake up? That how do you feel after training? It's getting to these, it's looking at the person, looking for signs. Do they have very dry hair? Do they have marks on their fingernails? Do they, what's their complexion like? It's sort of taking in all of those clues as well. We're not just robots ticking off a checklist. So yeah, really use our detective skills here.
Good answer. Okay, any role for CBD? Oh, the chat box just moved, just a sec. CBD peri-operatively, in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a great case recently, last year recently, with a professional cricketer in South Africa, and he snapped his Achilles tendon, or sliced it by falling down a step, and went clean through his Achilles, and horrific injury, potentially career defining, career ending, but we got him on CBD, so he used oral CBD, straight away, and then was also using CBD rub, around the scar, around the affected area as well, and had really, incredibly positive. He's now moved to the UK actually, and is playing for a UK professional team, and his surgeon was absolutely fascinated and intrigued by, quite how he sort of, managed the pain, got back into training, and that's just, one of several anecdotal stories, but also, as I said, the science that's coming in around the use of CBD for inflammatory pain, in particular. So yes, absolutely, I would recommend, looking at an oral CBD product, as I say, sublingual is best, so under the tongue, and a rub or a balm to impact the affected area as well.
Thank you. Okay, so Rhiannon, who asked about the Sativex,
yeah,
right, got it right. I'm interested generally in how the various essential medication and supplements that may be in routine use by Paralympic athletes with likes of MS, epilepsy, diabetes, etc., when not in the comparative testing periods, need to be phased out or suspended as competition training escalates. What are your thoughts around that? Is there any use for this in perhaps off-season periods?
Okay, yes. So basically, what's the washout period of THC that's in there? It's a very good question. Now, in terms of how the body processes phytocannabinoids, so our body breaks down phytocannabinoids through various enzymatic pathways in the liver, but there is sort of everybody has different levels, different what I call washout periods, different time lengths of actually excreting levels of THC, CBD in the body. I would work very closely with the Paralympic Association in terms of what they would advise and what they would recommend. I have had athletes that in off season have used medical cannabis in terms of certain areas, but you need to be very, very careful with testing. I would really err on the side of caution here, because of course it's a career, it's a coach's career that is at stake here if a ban, if any banned substances are detected. So in terms of sort of maintaining competition, then I would really steer clear of a THC containing product or another CBD containing product, unless as I say, the actual Paralympic Association is prepared to understand the research a little bit more there. Okay,
your last question for this evening. Is there any significant research on the use of CBD for depression and anxiety?
Yeah, so certainly in the anxiety area, as I say, the clinical studies, I'm first to admit, are still, small in number, and both in terms of numbers of studies and numbers of people that are looked at. But there are 2 or 3 now studies around the anxiety area that has shown that CBD really, has a good has a very positive impact on mood and reduction of anxiety. So, for example, there was a study looking at 72 patients, and there was something around an 80% reduction in anxiety scores and in anxiety feelings. And so I certainly find, from a clinical point of view, the 3 main areas that people are using CBD for and have real benefits to are anxiety, pain, and sleep. So, as I said, with the CBD side, you can use CBD during the day just to feel, a bit more relaxed, feel a little bit calmer. We know that CBD raises the body's natural levels of anandamide. This in turn helps us feel calmer. So in terms of the anxiety side, I would say that that's, sort of really shown to be pretty decent evidence. The depression side, there is more research that's ongoing at the moment, because, as I mentioned, CBD also works, phytocannabinoids also work at other receptors, such as 5-HT, and the serotonin receptors are very important in parts of areas of the brain that are, that are triggered, that are fired in depression. So again, that research is coming in. But for mood elevation, I would certainly consider using CBD as part of a program.
And of course, athletes can become a bit low in mood when they're training really hard, can't they?
Yes.
When they're depleting all their cofactor nutrients.
Totally. Oh yes. I mean, a depressed athlete is not uncommon in my world. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say a big thanks, Elisabeth. That was great. It's a complex area, and I wish I could have given you 2 or 3 hours to explore this, maybe next time.
Absolutely.
And we'll keep in touch and do something else as well. And also a big thanks to the audience. We've had a good participation and some great questions tonight. We will continue the webinar series first Wednesday of every month, and next month we've got vegetarian and vegan focus, so that should be interesting. So good night, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.
Bye.